On Sunday, November 5th of this year, I will be at DebateCon 4. I actually have 2 debates scheduled, one with Destiny, one with somebody called CSP Cypher. Links to get you tickets are in the description of this video. Come out, see me, meet me, have a great time. We are now years in to this experiment of defunding the police, the slogan put forward by the left wing that told us the actual problem with criminality wasn't the criminals committing crimes, it was actually the police department having money in order to deal with the criminals committing crimes. And few places have embraced this toxic ideology more than the city of Seattle. You'll remember they actually cut the salary of their black female police chief in order to signal to the woke that they were down with the cause. And over the past couple of years, they've actually reduced their police budget by a total of 13%. And unsurprisingly, as a result of this, we've seen an objective disaster. Now, I know the mayor called the Black Lives Matter riots the summer of love out of Seattle.
I think it shows a complete lack of understanding in why people are in the street. They're in the street fighting a system of domination, and he doesn't understand that. And his response is always one that's bellicose and militaristic, but he doesn't honor the military in that way either, as you've seen from the line of generals that have disputed him. So I think he says dominate because he totally does not understand what is happening in America, and he is desperately trying to start the old fights and the old divisions that put him in power in the first place.
How long do you think Seattle in those few blocks looks like this?
I don't know. We could have the summer of love.
But in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. And a perfect example of this is what is going on in the Seattle transit system. Because as I said on this channel a bunch of different times, the dollar amount that they're currently at today is nowhere near as relevant as the recruitment and the police officers going into retirement when the attitudes changed, when they started cutting the funding, because even if you were to restore it, it's not like you can materialize these officers out of nowhere. So we're looking at big problems in Seattle mass transit. We're looking at major issues, major crimes, and in some of their operations, they're down 20% of the officers that they would need, but in others, they're down as much as 40%, and the results are absolutely disastrous. We're going to get into that, but before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
Traveling by bus had some riders wondering about safety after a deadly crime in White Center, where witnesses saw a man gunned down before the shooter and possibly a second suspect hopped out and ran off.
I was across the street, I heard, "Hey, cuz, get on him." Bow! I start ducking.
So I just want to say I often do love this kind of energy from the local news when they interview people on the street, and they're so energetic about what they're describing, but make no mistake about it, as funny as that might have been to you,
I was across the street, I heard, "Hey, cuz, get on him." Bow! I start ducking.
this is no laughing matter in the city of Seattle. What we're seeing in terms of their transit system, particularly in their buses, is that crime is on the rise, and this is due to a number of factors. First and foremost, they worked diligently to cut their police force. They also had a change in culture, which drove down recruitment. Then you have officers going into retirement early, and all of these factors confound to having a shortage in the city of Seattle, and the response to that, by the way, is to increase the hiring bonuses for officers. So even if your goal is to cut the funding for law enforcement, guess what? It ends up having the opposite effect because people realize that they do in fact need law enforcement, the most obvious statement of all time, and then they end up approving something like $30,000 bonuses in order to hire new people on. But guess what? It's not nearly enough. And the approaches that they've tried in Seattle mass transit are absolutely ridiculous, but then again, what would you expect from the same people who told you the unprecedented rioting in our country and Antifa thugs declaring their own sovereign state in the middle of their city was just beautiful, loving behavior and totally mostly peaceful?
Many are now calling for added security measures.
The problem is because no hay security, no police.
But on the buses, yeah, maybe we need a little more safety for for that because, it's not the first time here, many problems on the buses.
So here you have some interviews from people on the street, and they're telling you the same thing. They need an increased police presence in order to drive down the crime. And by the way, notice that these are the people who actually take public transit. These are the people who actually live around where these crimes are occurring, and they understand and diagnose the problem, unlike the people in the Seattle City Council who are completely disconnected, busy spending more money on their own private security, and pretending that they solved some sort of systemic racism problem.
Metro does have transit security police, which is overseen by the King County Sheriff's Office. Como News reached out to both agencies to see if changes or enhancements are in the works. Metro says there is now an added security presence on the H line, the route where the shooting occurred.
Sound Transit, which operates the train, says they now have 3 times as many security guards when compared with a year ago.
Now, I think that is incredibly crucial. They're telling you that they've tripled the number of security guards as opposed to what they had the previous year. However, they're down in terms of their transit officers, 22% and 40% respectively.
But transit police are seriously understaffed. The King County Metro Police are 22% below full staff, and the Sound Transit Police are 40% below full staff. Those are dozens of vacant police positions that should be patrolling trains, buses, and stations around Seattle.
Now that might sound confusing to you. You might be wondering, oh my God, how much down on the police were they in order to get to this point where they could triple it and they still have those deficits? But what you need to understand is there are actually 2 different categories. You see, because they don't have the officers, they're contracting out to private security firms in order to backfill what they need in order to keep transit riders safe. However, these security guards do not have arrest power like officers, and more importantly, just as promised by the Defund the Police advocates, they're completely unarmed. So when we go to this article, what we discover is that as of October 6th of this year, both the shooting suspect that we reference and a suspect in a hammer assault remain on the loose. They have not been arrested, they are free and out there in the public, and this is something that should be concerning to all of you. However, what is incredibly crucial is that they've actually doubled their patrols, even though they've tripled their staff. However, these are unarmed guard patrols, which means their response time has been cut in half from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. However, they're not able to interact with these violent criminals in the way that officers do.
Police are still trying to find out who killed a man on this Metro bus.
They brought a body out, but he was already dead.
Other passengers witnessed the shooting, which comes just days after 2 passengers were attacked with a hammer at a Seattle train station. Police are still searching for this guy.
Like they have him on cameras in the train.
In the last few months, at least 2 train passengers have been stabbed, and a rider in Soto was beaten with a rock.
I mean, just think about the problem that they're dealing with in these transit systems. You have shootings, you have hammer attacks, you have rock attacks, you have drug usage, you have people getting violent just with regular fistfights, and yet your security guards are supposed to engage with all of that using hand-to-hand combat. They're supposed to get into a karate battle with all of these people, which obviously is not going to lead to the same positive results that an officer trained and prepared to deal with situations that can escalate will actually yield. This is one of the reasons why, even though they're loading up on this security, the fact that they're completely defanged in the city of Seattle really goes to show you that nothing is actually going to get done. And by the way, the city council actually knows this. They're fully aware of this, and they have another strategy to force you to ride their dangerous transit system, even though they have no real interest or capability of protecting it. We will get to that a little bit later, but I think it's absolutely crucial for you to understand the kind of violence that is going on this system.
Riders are watching their backs.
It's tragic, to be honest. People get stabbed.
You see people like this a lot, like in public, and it's hard to know whether they're actually a threat or not.
Transit agencies have been trying to increase security.
So yeah, those incidents are absolutely horrible, and with the shooting that we referenced earlier, we can see that the response is to guard up the H line, which is where it occurred, but again, they're putting 2 unarmed guards on the H line in order to protect it, and considering the issue particularly over there was a shooting, a basically execution on that bus, it doesn't really seem like unarmed guards with their karate skills are going to be able to deal with that.
Ridership on transit has slowly been rebounding since the pandemic, but transit agencies have been criticized for being slow to address drug use on board and protecting riders and train operators.
Now, as you see, their ridership is starting to rebound since the pandemic. It's not going back to full force, and part of the reason why is because they've essentially created a death spiral by locking people down in the first place, which strangled the transit system, and then they pivoted to this defund the police thing after the Black Lives Matter riots, and a lot of people just do not feel safe on their transit system. I mean, it is quite telling that every time they interview an everyday person, a normal person in the city of Seattle that actually has to ride the transit system, they diagnose the problem as exactly the same, and that is borne out by the statistics. You think every random individual knows that one transit agency is down 40% in terms of their officers and the other is down 22%? Absolutely not.
I think they need to come to more police to watch them.
But yet, over and over again, they say the same thing because they see it, they interact with it, they remember how it was before, way back in that far-flung year of 2019, and obviously, as I've said multiple times on this channel, if you want the same results of 2019, you should probably reinstitute the same policies of 2019. However, like I said, Seattle is going in a completely different direction. They're doing something that we are actually familiar with in the city of New York. When transit ridership goes down, when people don't feel safe on your rail, on your subway, on your buses, instead of addressing those particular issues, you then declare a financial crisis in the transit system, and then you decide that you're going to go after drivers to try to force them into the mass transit system. And this is exactly what is being proposed in the city of Seattle, because if there's violence on the transit system and they can't address it, obviously it is the fault of the drivers.
Today, state leaders will take their first steps towards potentially higher tolls and more tolling hours on Washington highways.
And we're talking tolls that could go as high as $18 for some express toll lanes.
So as you can see right there, they're proposing increases to their tolls for their express lanes because they feel like the express lanes aren't free of traffic enough, which, by the way, on its own in a vacuum would make perfect sense. But it's the part about funding all these other projects that makes me very skeptical of what's going on.
Yeah, Mimi, Kristen, they've been discussing this for a while, and two of the main reasons they keep coming back is that they've learned that during the pandemic with fewer drivers, they were bringing in less revenue, and that revenue is needed to work on much needed projects. The other reason is they think that those express lanes could need some help in terms of congestion.
So this is always the trick. This is always the bait and switch. It's been happening forever. You increase the tolls, you say it's going to go to do other projects. Those projects are complete boondoggles, the roads fall into disrepair, so then you have to increase the tolls, but you continually divert money to those failed projects.
The commission will discuss 3 potential toll rate increases, which include 2 scenarios going from $10 to $15 per trip. A third option does include rates eventually reaching $18. And you think about, that sounds like a lot already, and in comparison to weekend tolls, say using the 405 express lanes, you can do free tolling for weekends and holidays. So put that in perspective of paying $10 to $15, maybe $18 at some point.
We would have a lot better infrastructure in this country overall if the user fees, i.e. the gas tax, which is meant to pay for the roads and bridges in this country, was actually allocated to the roads and bridges in this country. If the tolls, which are additional user fees, did the same, guess what? We would have top-of-the-line infrastructure, and we wouldn't have to hear every 4 years, every 5 years, whenever they want to pass an incredibly ridiculous spending bill in the Congress, that our infrastructure is crumbling. But the thing is, every time they get this new revenue, they end up putting it into trains. Every time they get this new revenue, they end up putting it into ancillary projects. Every time they get this new revenue, it never goes towards maintenance because guess what? Maintenance of roads is just not sexy. It's not something that you can have a ribbon cutting ceremony in front of. However, it is what actually makes your city, your state work. I mean, filling potholes, Again, not something that's going to get the governor out there, but the announcement of a new light rail station that's never going to be operational and is going to cost 100 times what was originally pitched, that is definitely something that you can have a groundbreaking ceremony in front of. It is ridiculous what is going on in the city of Seattle. It's absurd that their transit crime is this out of hand, that their recruitment for officers is this down, and that they have to spend all this additional funds in order to hire unarmed private security that is powerless to address the problem, but further cripples the system and thus draws the attention and the need from Washington state to increase tolls in order to subsidize these failing operations. This is what we call a death spiral. It is happening in real time. The decline of major metropolitan areas in the United States of America is due to policy. It is not inevitable. However, the way that these people operate is as if there is nothing they can do but continually double down. But hey, those are just my thoughts, so let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the death spiral in Seattle. Till next time.